background.
Did you grow up in a house with music?
Not really, no. I'm just a guy who plays the piano, pretty much. I'm not very interesting. I grew up in New Jersey, and that's northeastern. I went there last week, revisited it. See, it hasn't changed much.
We lived in Princeton.
To Princeton, yeah, I've been there. I was in Englewood, Tenafly, that area. So, good afternoon, good early evening. It's almost dinner time. And I'd like to start. I'm Robert, by the way. It's good to be back. And I'd like to play some improvisation for you. If you wouldn't mind helping me out. I think we did something like this last time. If you give me a note, any note to start. C. Okay, good. I need a few more. D. You can sharpen flat if you like. Ooh. Okay, one more. Anybody? B flat. Oh, yeah, that sounds like something out of Chopin, but I'll do something with it. Okay, let's see. Thank you. I had to quote briefly the Chopin Ballade number 1 because there's those notes you gave me famously are part of that. But I didn't want to overdo it, just a little hint of it. Okay, so speaking of Chopin, I'm actually going to start with a piece by Chopin. And wait 1 second, I want to just raise this a little bit, if it moves up. Yeah. I don't play a lot of Chopin's music. I love his music. He's one of the best composers. But his music is very pure in a way. And to really capture that mood, it's tricky for me at least. In other words, I feel like a cow on ice when I play Chopin. It's so graceful. And this is an early work of his. He was very young when he wrote it. And Chopin is one of those composers who really had his style from the beginning. You hear 3 notes and it's Chopin. Maybe Mozart was like that too. But not all composers were like that. Maybe Schumann was not. Liszt was not. They had to develop the hard way, so to speak. I'm not saying that they had it easy, Chopin, but it's just a different temperament. And this early piece already has these 2 distinct ingredients in it. One is Polish folk music. You're going to hear this. That is the sound of Polish folk music. Then, his other great love, because Chopin was from Poland, He was an exile from Poland, left as the country became virtually a prison occupied by Russia. And he lived in Paris after that. Not a bad place to live, but still he was just very painfully missing his home. His great love when he lived in Paris was Italian opera. He was obsessed with Bellini and Donizetti. And when you hear his music, this is a nocturne. Nocturne means a night piece. It really sounds like an opera aria. The left hand is like the orchestra accompanying. And then the right hand is like the singer.
You promised me resort, Steve.
Sorry about that. So that's the sense he gives, the sense of Italian opera. So I'm going to play this famous piece, the Nocturne in C sharp minor by Chopin. It was made famous in a movie called The Pianist, based on the life of Polish Jewish pianist Władysław Szpilman, who plays this. The real, actual Szpilman plays this. There's a video on YouTube, and it's breathtaking how he plays it. You know, Szpilman survived the Holocaust, and that's what the movie is about. And when he plays this, it's just his whole life in there. So this is the piece, C sharp minor Nocturne by Chopin. Thank you. Now a piece that's also a bit of a downer. Another one, I'm sorry to say that. This is the famous Schubert Serenade Stanchen by Franz Schubert. It's a vocal piece. I don't sing, and I don't sing in German, so I'm playing Liszt's arrangement for piano solo. It's a very famous piece, but Schubert wrote it in the last year of his very short life. He only lived to be 31, which is so tragic to think about. And actually, in his last year, he wrote so much music because he knew that his time was limited. So, I've been thinking about Schubert a lot because Schubert is unusual in the sense that among the big names who all lived in Vienna, not all but most of the great composers of this time, Schubert was actually born in Vienna. Mozart was not. He was born in Salzburg. Beethoven was born in Bonn. It's not Austria, it's what's now Germany. So Brahms was born in Hamburg, Germany. So Schubert's unusual in this sense, and there's a feeling, something very Viennese to his music. So I've probably told you this before, but there's some anecdotes and jokes contrasting the culture of Austria and Germany, or let's say Vienna and Berlin. They speak the same language, but it couldn't be more different. So the joke is like this. In Berlin, things are very serious, but there's hope. And Beethoven's like this. And I'll play some Beethoven actually after this to show the difference. In Vienna, things are not so serious, but there's no hope. And that's kind of how I see Schubert. There's a lightness to this piece, a lilt to it. And it's like this. I mean, there's a lightness to it. There's a dance, a little bit of a dance feeling to it. But it's so bleak, too. It's this laughter and tears at the same time, something like that. I used to joke when I was much younger, I would tell some friends that how would Beethoven and Schubert react to romantic breakup? And the difference is that Beethoven would simply get very mad and he would say, how dare she? And Schubert would just sort of say, well, she was beautiful, but what could I do? Oh well. Woe is me, right? So something like that. So it's just a different temperament. And that's kind of how I see it. I know I'm kind of joking about it, but that's how I see the two, to contrast them. Of course, Schubert was admiring Beethoven tremendously. Schubert was not well known during his lifetime. And there are stories that Schubert would see Beethoven sitting in a coffee shop somewhere and he would want to speak to him, but he would be afraid to. So that's the story. So this is the famous Serenade Stanchen by Schubert, arranged by Liszt. Well, how about some Beethoven as a contrast? So I think that part of, it's not just Vienna that I'm speaking about, that why Schubert's music has this pessimism to it, Beethoven's has an optimism to it. This is too much of a generalization as well. I feel bad, saying that, but there's a little bit of truth to that. But I think it's also the conditions that they suffered from, physical conditions, that Schubert had syphilis, and there was no cure for it, and he knew his time was limited. Beethoven, on the other hand, he went deaf, and there's different explanations for this. I'm not a medical person, but I've heard people say that there's some research into some of his locks of hair. Beethoven, they found that he may have had lead poisoning, and that contributed to hearing loss. That things were not so, medicine was not so great back then, It may have been because he drank a certain cheap wine that was kept in metal barrels. But this is all not proven, but it's just interesting to think of. But Beethoven, around in 1806, when he wrote this, I'm going to play the last part of his violin concerto in his own piano arrangement. Played it here before, maybe once. So forgive me for repeating something, but he wrote this in 1806 as he was going deaf. And this is around the time he wrote a famous letter to his brother called the Heilige Stadt Testimony, where he describes his anguish at losing his hearing. Can you imagine? Think of a painter losing their vision. It's the same thing. But Beethoven somehow kept going. He didn't stop. He had this drive in him. Yes, his life was very lonely. He isolated himself purposefully because he was embarrassed to talk to people and such with his deafness, but he didn't have it easy, but there was a joy that he chose to have. And I mean, we can all look up to that, I think, because everyone has something. Maybe not everyone is losing their hearing like Beethoven was, but everyone has something that's not so savory in their life. But Beethoven is an example of this, of a hero, really. He chose to be, despite everything, to keep going. I think that's why he speaks to us 200 years later, more than 200 years later. This last part of the violin concerto, the first two movements, which I've played here before the past few months, those are very philosophical movements. This last movement is a lively dance. It's a Ländler, which is a country dance from Austria, the mountains, in three. It's a heavy 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's good for beer drinking or something, It's got Oktoberfest in there. So here it is, and a later piece, the Ninth Symphony, is the same trajectory. Beethoven, most of the Ninth Symphony is very heavy and very dark, and then at the end you have the Ode to Joy. So it's almost like you have to go through all of that, and then there's the triumph at the end. I think of it as like the human spirit triumph. I was listening to things in the car, things that I've either never heard or heard but need to hear again. The Beethoven choral fantasy. Oh, what a genius piece. I mean, everything he wrote was, but it's for piano and orchestra and choir. Foreshadows the Ninth Symphony. Wow. So, at any rate, I'm talking too much. This is the third movement of the violin concerto by Beethoven. In his own version, he rewrote it for piano because the first performance with violin was kind of a mess. So he rewrote it. don't think I've played this here before. I'm going to play you the last movement, another last movement of César Franck, the Violin Sonata, arranged for solo piano by Alfred Cortot. César Franck, Alfred Cortot. I feel like I can speak French, so I try, but ce n'est pas très bien en français, n'est-ce pas? Franck was a Belgian composer, but mostly lived in Paris. He was an organist, and a lot of his music has the influence of organ music. He was a bit of a Catholic mystic, and there's that feeling in a lot of his music. Some people say that, someone said that his pieces are like sermons through sound. Franck is unusual because, unlike Mozart, he was a bit of a late bloomer. I think he wrote all his, or most of his masterpieces like after the age of 60 or 65. And including this piece, the Violin Sonata, the Franck Sonata. It sounds like Frank Sinatra, right? That's a bad joke there, sorry. And I think over time I have played you movements 1, 2, and 3 of this. Definitely have not played this last one for you yet. So this last movement is interesting because it starts out very innocently. It almost sounds like a Schubert piece or something. And then it gets very dark, real fast. And then it goes back to being innocent and lyrical. I played this somewhere in the countryside, far away. And I explained that this piece, that Franck had actually written this as a wedding present for Eugene Izay, a great fellow Belgian composer and violinist. And apparently Izay played it at his wedding. Sight read it, can you believe that? So I never understood how this works as a wedding gift. It's just too dark, it's too heavy. I went to my friend's wedding in New York recently. I wouldn't be able to write a piece like this, but it just doesn't seem like a wedding gift. And I told this to the group, and I played this movement, and a lady in the back stood up, and she said, I know exactly why he wrote it as a wedding present. I said, please tell me, because I want to understand. She said, well, it's just like marriage. I said, what? It starts out innocent, and then it gets dark real fast, and then it resolves. And I said, ma'am, you explained it just perfectly. Speaking about accents, I don't actually have that accent, but I was very touched at the local store. I live in a small town in Mebane, but I'm from New Jersey originally. And I was very touched that this lady who works there, she said, where have y'all been? I said, we were up north, and I'm from New Jersey. And she looked at me and said, but you don't sound like it. I said, really? Thank you. But anyway, it's nice. And I'm stalling because this piece is very tricky. So here's the last movement of the César Franck Violin Sonata, arranged for solo piano by Alfred Cortot. it's the stuff of nightmares to play it. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's supposed to be for piano and violin. And the arrangement here just took the violin part and smushed it in there. Play it all with your two hands, right? Okay, so it's tricky. I shouldn't complain, but sometimes people tell me, how do you memorize stuff? It's very, very, very difficult to do. Just lots of torture. Practicing and almost feeling like crying and then doing that the next day, rinse and repeat, and then hopefully you remember it. So, time, let's see, I wonder. Well, thank you, I try. Well, I don't want to make you late to dinner. Okay, I played a couple more classical pieces, and then I have a very lively, maybe gospel to close with. So this is another arrangement. This is kind of my arrangement. I'm going to play the 18th variation of Rachmaninoff's Paganini Rhapsody. It's famous piece. And here's the story. Rachmaninoff was born in 1873. He was Russian. He was a Russian aristocrat, although he didn't really have any privilege from that. His father gambled away all the family money when he was a young adolescent or something. But still, when the communist revolution happened in 1917, he didn't see a future for himself and his family. He left. First went to Europe, ended up settling in this country. First New York, then Beverly Hills for some reason. So California. Rachmaninoff was deeply nostalgic his whole life for his home. It's a bit like the story with Chopin, that he never returned to his country, his birth, his motherland, right? Russian nostalgia and gloominess is a sort of a famous thing. Just look at Russian literature. Dostoevsky tells you everything. So this piece, the whole Rhapsody, he wrote it after a period when he didn't compose much in the 1920s, when he was in this country. His compositional creativity had sort of dried up. He was depressed, kind of, probably. But in the 1930s, it all came back, and he wrote all this great music, including the Paganini Rhapsody. But Rachmaninoff's style had changed. It had become a little sharper, a little drier. And that's why he used the Paganini 24th Caprice as the basis. Last time I played you Brahms's variations on that. Eventually I'll play you the whole Rachmaninoff piece. Today I'm just playing this 18th variation, which is, to me, it's a throwback to his earlier style as a young man in Russia. And how does he do it? He takes this theme and he flips it upside down. If you take the sheet music and you flip it upside down, you get this. And he made that thing. Now, I've played this a few times and people tell me, there's a movie from the 80s that uses that, Christopher Reeve, Somewhere in Time. I've never seen it. I've got to see it. Somebody told me, well, it's a little schmaltzy, but it's good. I love schmaltzy. Why not? There's only one problem. The movie is about time travel, and it's supposed to take place in 1911. Well, Rachmaninoff wrote this in the 1930s. That's okay. So, but yeah, you might recognize this. And I think there are probably other movies that use this. Stravinsky was not very kind to Rachmaninoff. He said that he was a 6.5-foot scowl that wrote grandiose film music. Rachmaninoff responded by calling Stravinsky Madame Butterfly. It's a good thing musicians don't hate each other nowadays. A little sarcasm. Okay, so. one more classical piece. This is Zigeuner Weissen. I love saying it. Gypsy Airs by Pablo de Sarasate. It's a violin piece, of course. I'm obsessed with violin, but too lazy to play it, to learn it. And this is an arrangement by the Romanian composer who mostly lived in France, George Enescu. Great genius who's underappreciated. He was not only a composer, he was a great violinist and a great pianist. This is actually something he didn't actually write out this arrangement. He recorded it to a piano roll. Remember those? Those are really old things, but that was before recording. So he did a piano roll, and some person on the internet actually wrote it out. They must be brilliant or have a lot of time on their hands or both, but I'm really grateful to this person whoever did it. It's really great. So I can play this on the piano. I don't have to learn violin. So this is a typical gypsy piece because it starts out slow, like a slow improvisation, and it's imitating the sound of the cembalon, which is a gypsy folk instrument. It's actually an instrument with strings like here, and you have these mallets and you play like this. It's not going to sound great, but it's a little bit thing. It sounds like that. On the piano, he imitates it like this. This like vibrating, sound. That's the cembalon. Then it goes into a couple slow dances. This is typical of a gypsy piece. So then you have. And then another one is. And then finally at the end, there's a lively, very lively dance, which is. So, and it ends kind of like that. So, here it is. I told you I would play the happier stuff towards the end. We had the really sad music in the beginning. So here's Sarasate, arranged by Enescu, Zigeuner Weissen, gypsy airs, gypsy songs. real quick, another really lively piece to close. This is a Southern gospel song called Goodbye World, Goodbye by Mosey Lister. And the first time I heard it, I really didn't like it. I thought it sounded like something from the Benny Hill Show. Remember that? It grew on me. It grew because the reason I say that is it's a very lively and upbeat piece. And it's so much so that I didn't quite get it the first couple, but then I really got it. The feeling of it. But I just, you'll see, it's a lot of fun. It's just a wonderful gospel, but it just takes, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just upbeat. It takes sort of jittery to a whole different meaning. So you'll see what I mean. It's, here it is. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy supper.
Thank you very much.
Would you be back next year?
Oh, yes, I'll be back in a month.
I want to hold this.
Oh, thank you.
They are so strong.
They tried, but
But
thank
they
you.
don't feel like muscle.
Oh, no.
The flex.
Yeah, that's what it has to be.
But I remember you from last year.
Yeah. I come here a lot, so.
You're great.
Thank
Is
you
this your
very much.
family back here?
No, it's not. No.
Nobody?
Well, everyone's my family here.
No, these people.
Well, officially not, but unofficially, yes. Because I.
Talk during
Oh.
the phone. I kept hearing.
Oh, it's okay.
No, it's not.
Well, thank you for being here. Let me just get this.